Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Nick and this is NJS Garage. And in this video, we are going to be putting this engine back in this truck. Everything's painted, looks good. Going to get the engine in, going to get the transmission in, and we'll see what else we can get done in this video, whether we get the intake and stuff on like that. That would be great. We got a bunch of small things to do once that's in, set timing, all that stuff, and get it running. I don't know if we're going to get it running in this video, but I will obviously show you guys the first start and take you along with me. So let's go ahead and get to work. Alright guys, so just as easy as it came out, went in just as easy. Engine is technically in. We got the jack holding the back of the engine up right now. Next thing we have to do is get it up on the lift and start putting everything on the back half of this engine. Alright guys, so we are back underneath the truck and the engine's in. We are getting ready to put bell housing on next. So we're going to be putting some blue Loctite on the 4 bolts that go inside the bell housing. That way they don't back out, because if they do, they will hit the flywheel. We don't want that to happen. Perfect. Your alignment tool, once you're all done, should be able to slide right in, right out, and right in. Minimal effort. That means you're good to go. So now that all that's done, we can get the clutch fork and everything on and stab this transmission in real quick. Alright everybody, so engine is back in, trans is in, all the clutch components are in. We're back down on the ground, and I think it turned out great. I like the color combo of the gloss black firewall and that copper color engine. I think it contrasts itself really nicely. I think it looks great. So we're going to go ahead and get our intake and headers on. that's the next step. All right, what we're gonna work on now is getting our Clifford intake and header system on. I already got my gasket on. Just gonna get these headers set in place first. Okay, looks good. Grab the intake. Alright guys, so in the last clip you see me putting on the intake and headers. So I'm going to show you that right now. I already got everything tightened up, torqued down, as you can see. So one thing that you have to do is you actually got to get 1/2-inch washers to use as spacers instead of some of this factory stuff that comes from the manufacturer. They want you to use 1/2-inch washers. I had to stack a couple in some places because my nuts were actually bottoming out on the shoulder of the studs before they would tighten down. So I just had to stack a couple, and if you look, you can see that they're actually bending the washers. That's nothing to be worried about. That is how they're supposed to be. The manufacturer recommends that they actually bend the washers around the intake and the headers to get a good seal. And these are supposed to be torqued down to 30 foot-pounds, working from the inside out. The reason why they want you to use these washers and everything, because if you look, it might be hard to tell, these are actually different thicknesses. And that's because one's aluminum, one is steel. And they're gonna expand and contract differently when the engine is getting warmed up and cooling down. So they've thought of all this. All this stuff is the way you are supposed to do it. So if you are going to be using this setup, make sure you get some 1/2-inch washers and do it the way I did. And you actually want the washers to bend. So don't be worried that you're over torquing these or anything. It's not the case. You have to do that per their request, otherwise you'll void your warranty. So the next thing we're going to get ready to do is, we got our clutch, transmission, all that in, but we got to get our clutch linkage put back in. So that's what we're going to get ready to do right now. Okay, so we're under the truck and we got some clutch linkage to put in. This right here is our clutch linkage. Bring you around. So this bar, this is the rod going to our clutch pedal, and this connects to that clutch pedal. This is going to go to the pickle fork back here, and once we get this piece on, this is going to mount to the bell housing. It's got this little ball on the end of it, like a ball socket type design, and it's like a Z-bar setup where as you push your clutch, this is going to pivot backwards, which is going to push this forward like that. So pretty simple setup. I wanted to bring you in and show you what we're dealing with real quick before I go ahead and do it. There's 2 bolts here, 2 bolts here, right on the bell housing. Very simple setup. Alright, so while the truck is up in the air, I figured it might as well be a good time to get the drive shaft thrown back in, because it is very easy to do. If the transmission is in neutral, it is. I guess while you're down here, can talk about the rear end and everything. This is, if you can't tell by looking at it, a Ford 9-inch rear end. which obviously is not factory, but it's a really good rear end. It was in the truck when I got it, and I wouldn't change any bit of it because the factory drive line would have came with a closed drive shaft or a torque tube. So they're not really the most ideal setup, and in order to change that, it's kind of a pain because you have to change the rear end in order to go to a more modern open drive line like we have here. So I like the setup like that. We also have a 389 rear gear, which works out pretty good. It's a little low for going on the highway and stuff because this is only a 3-speed. So normally I can run about 60, 65 mile an hour, and I'm turning about 3,000 RPM, which is kind of high for this engine considering red line's at like 5,000. But normally I don't get up to the 65 mile an hour area. I normally keep it at like 55, so it's not that big of a deal. Plus it has 28-inch tall tires in the rear back here with the setup I'm running now, which will change in the future. And I'll probably try and put a 29-inch tall tire on the back, which will help drop the RPMs down at speed. So when I did all the math to figure out which rear end gear I wanted, I calculated the math with a 29-inch tall tire. So now, with being a 28, the RPM's a little bit higher, but it's still doable. And once I get a taller tire, it's only going to help. So, I figured I'd give you a little bit of information while we're down here. And it is drum brakes all the way around, manual drum brakes, leaf spring all the way around, still has the factory straight axle up front with leaf springs. It's got 3-inch dropped mono leafs in this front, and we're running like a 3-inch drop spacer in back here. And I actually like this setup a lot because to me, part of having an older vehicle like this is experiencing what it would have been like to drive, you know, back when this vehicle was made, or if some guy back in the 60s or something did a build similar to this is what it would be like. And that's part of the fun to me, having this stuff, is experiencing it, what it would have been like back in the day. Because, you know, anybody could drop a body on an S10 chassis and have all the modern technology, but then at the end of the day, you're just driving an S10. It's not that fun to me. They also got front end sections where you could put an independent front suspension on, or do like a Mustang 2 front suspension, but you have to cut the frame and do all that, and I'm not doing that because this frame is actually in pretty good shape. It's got some surface rust and stuff from sitting for a while, but it's solid, and I'm not going to cut up this factory frame. And I'm not putting this body on an S10 chassis. Yes, you can get them lower and they look cooler and they ride better, but it just defeats some of the fun and some of the purpose of having this type of vehicle in my mind. I mean, somebody else might say differently, but to me, part of the fun of owning these older vehicles and this older truck is driving it the way that people would have had to experience it back in the 50s. So I like the setup like this. Yes, this is not the factory rear end. It has an open drive line. Nobody would ever go back to the factory system if they got it like this. So that's how we're going to keep it. I do like the front end set up this way. It actually doesn't ride as bad as people probably say they do. It actually rides pretty good. So I like it. next thing we're gonna do is get this thing back on the ground, and we're gonna start bolting some stuff to the engine, getting the belt on, fan on, you know, stuff like that. And then besides oil and priming it and dropping the distributor in, you know, we're pretty much there. 4 bolts, throw the carburetor on, you know, nothing to it. So we're gonna go ahead and get to work, stop talking, and try and get this thing running as soon as possible. So the next thing we are doing is getting our carburetor put on, and I've got new gaskets and everything for that. This is for my throttle linkage, throttle cable, runs off of this. Alright, so we have got the carburetor and everything on. Everything looks good. It does look like we are going to have to redo our throttle cable because it is too short now to reach with this different intake. Not a big deal. If that's the only thing we have to deal with, I'd be very happy. I'm going to go ahead and throw these on the intake. These are some 90-degree fittings for our coolant lines when we're going to be running that 3/8 hard line. I'm just going to throw these in here right now. 1, so I don't lose them, and 2, that way when we go to get this all mocked up and start making our lines, they're roughly in the place that they're going to go. And that'll be coming up soon, us making these coolant lines. If I can get this fitting in. And then also, so I think I'm going to run them maybe both in the same direction. We'll see what happens when we go to start making line. I'm going to go for what looks best, but I also need to go for what's going to function the best, what's going to be easiest to maintenance if I have to. I think running a coolant line towards the firewall and back around is going to be too much of a hassle. I think this is going to be the best way to do it. We'll see when we get there. Alright, so we got our intake on. We got these fittings and everything on, carburetor's on, and it looks really good. I really like the way this came out. Alternator, belt, fan, all that's on. This side of the engine, still nothing on it. We'll get to it. We also got to do all the wiring and stuff still. But man, if you look at it from this side, that looks awesome. I can't wait to drive this truck. It looks so good. Like I said, our throttle linkage obviously is way too short. So we're gonna have to redo that because the intakes is set up a little different than the factory one. But like I said, if that's all we have to do, it's not a big deal. It's cheap, it's easy. I'm fine with it. Everything looks really good. If you're curious on the carburetor, obviously 4-barrel Edelbrock. This is a 600 carburetor. Nothing too crazy. Manual secondaries, manual choke. Everything about this truck, I tried to keep it simple when I was building it originally. I tried to keep everything as manual as possible, and I like the way it came out. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. We ended up getting a lot more done than I originally planned on getting done. So go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate you guys watching. Also, I've noticed that there's a bunch of you guys who are watching the videos who have not subscribed to the channel. Go ahead and do that, please, because it will send you notifications when I post a new video, and we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. So that's going to do it for this video. I'll see you next time.